Hong Kong rocked by the worst day of violent clashes since the protests began more than 7 months ago. Police shot at protesters, one at close range. A 21-year-old remains in critical condition. And then a counter-protester was covered in a flammable liquid and set on fire by demonstrators. Obviously, we're not going to show you that one. Joining us now is Claudia Rosette, the Independent Women's Forum's Foreign Policy Fellow. So, Claudia, does the violence of the protesters make it a little more difficult for the U.S. to come to their defense?
On the surface, yes. But if you really look at the reasons, it's really important not to confuse the tactics with the actual demands, with what this is about. And the real blame for all of this, David, goes to President Xi Jinping in China and his stooge chief executive in Hong Kong, Kerry Lam. Because what you're seeing is what happens when China gets its hands on a free society. And what the demonstrators have come up against is this blank refusal to give them the rights and freedoms, to let them keep the rights and freedoms China promised under treaty, as well as free elections. So the violence is sickening at this point on both sides, but the two sides are not equivalent. The protesters' demands are fundamentally right. China's handling of this is wrong.
Well, just to talk about, Claudia, it's Christina Parts-Neveles here, to talk about how China's handling it. Before the United States comes to their defense, would you suggest certain solutions that are being tossed around, like amnesty for all the crimes, maybe creating an independent committee that can look at this anti-violence or anti-corruption, or just having Kerry Lamb step down? What solutions, specific ones, do you think should happen?
She should certainly step down. She should have been fired some time ago, but that's not, the people of Hong Kong have no power to do that. Neither do we, unless we can force President Xi Jinping to do it, because it's entirely China's call. That's the system they're protesting, basically. There are things we could do. I think Secretary of State Pompeo gave a great speech on China October 30th. I think it's time that President Trump spoke out really specifically and clearly in similar ways about Hong Kong. And any pressure we can bring to bear right now to get rid of Kerry Lam, and for China to actually honor its promises under treaty of the handover that gave them Hong Kong from Britain, would be useful.
Claudia, don't you think that could backfire, though? It seems to me the Chinese have been pretty adamant that they don't want the United States weighing in on their so-called internal affairs. I mean, I would think it would require a significant step up in the damage being done here before we would really consider weighing in any sort of forceful manner. And I also think with the economy in Hong Kong now in recession, I would think a lot of people there are beginning to really wish that the protesters would stand down, that there would be some negotiations with the Kerry Lamb group, even if it is Kerry Lamb. I mean, I just can't imagine that the U.S. putting their finger on the scale right now is the right approach.
Well, the problem there is that Kerry Lam isn't negotiating. First, she has no power to, just none. She's a puppet. I mean, this was clear in her meeting with President Xi in Shanghai and the vice premier in Beijing just a few days ago. She's there as a figurehead until they get rid of her at their convenience. Would it backfire? You know, what can we do? I don't think it can be much worse than what they already have in the works, because this is escalating and escalating. China is giving them nothing. And they're not backing down because they see that what they see ahead is Xinjiang, is China's gulag, is China's secret police and arrests and repression. So if there's anything we can do, even if China doesn't like it, that says you really need to give them something. You promised them elections, do that. Get rid of this chief executive now. That's worth doing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the U.S. could just speak out, not step in. I can understand Americans are very wary about any type of U.S. direct involvement. But, Ronald Reagan denounced authoritarianism. He didn't congratulate it on Twitter, as the president has done, at least when it comes to Chinese communist dictatorship. So just in my opinion, and I don't know, maybe Liz, you disagree with this, or Gary, you disagree with this, but be that moral example of a free economy and let everyone in China and Hong Kong wish they could emigrate to the U.S.
Yeah, actually, right now, probably a lot of people in Hong Kong do, but there are 7.5 million of them, so they can't all leave. And for them, it is their home. They have family, that's their home. A lot of them are born there. But Look, the U.S. isn't going to intervene with force. The part of the problem with Hong Kong is if you try and defend it with force, you'll destroy the city anyway. It's too small a place. China controls the water and the power. So this has got to be done diplomatically. And on that score, forceful talk is a very good idea right now.
So, Claudia, the economy's in recession, tourism is way down, and now there's a video playing 24/7 around the world of a protester being shot, which is certainly not going to help. You say diplomacy, but what kind of diplomacy and between who? What is the way forward at this point? Because it looks like we're in the worst position since this started.
China signed a treaty in 1984 promising Hong Kong rights of free speech and assembly, its accustomed way of life, and ultimately universal suffrage. It's in breach of every single part of that right now. They signed it with Britain, but this is an international treaty deposited at the UN. It's not an internal Chinese affair. And the US and Britain and any democratic allies from Japan to France should now be denouncing China for being in violation of its treaty and pointing out the implications for China's economy if China is a country that won't stick to a deal.
Claudia Rosette, former editorial page editor of the Asian Wall Street Journal. Good to see you, Claudia. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.